Millionaire sees homeless man feeding lost dog. His reaction is shocking. Richard Thompson never imagined that a simple traffic jam would completely change his life. The 63-year-old businessman, owner of one of the largest construction companies in New York City, was stuck in traffic on Fifth Avenue when he saw something that made his heart stop. A man who appeared to be around his age was crouched on the sidewalk, sharing what seemed to be his only piece of bread with a skinny, frightened, tan-colored mutt. What struck Richard the most wasn't just the act of generosity, but the tender way the homeless man petted the animal, whispering words of comfort as he fed it with his own hands. "Easy there, buddy, it's gonna be all right," said the barefoot man wearing a worn-out t-shirt and pants torn at the knees. "I know you're hungry, but you gotta eat slow." Richard felt a strange pang in his chest as he watched the scene. How long had it been since he'd seen someone show such care and compassion? In his world of endless meetings and million-dollar contracts, simple acts of kindness had become rare. He instinctively reached for his phone to call his driver, but something made him stop. On impulse, he stepped out of the car, leaving the black Cadillac stalled in the middle of the gridlock. "Sir, what are you doing?" shouted William, his driver, trying to catch up. But Richard was already weaving through the cars, his Italian shoes splashing in puddles from the recent rain. When he got closer, he noticed the homeless man had piercing green eyes, partially hidden by unkempt grey hair and a scruffy beard. The dog, a medium-sized tan-colored mutt, had an old collar with no identification and was trembling slightly, whether from cold or fear. "Excuse me," Richard said, his voice rougher than he intended. The man slowly looked up, showing no surprise or fear. There was a dignity in his gaze that contrasted with his worn appearance. "Yes, doctor," he replied in a calm, polite voice that didn't match his situation. "This dog, is he yours?" "No, I just found him here. Must have been lost. 4 days, poor thing. Look how thin he is," the man answered, still petting the animal. "But don't worry, I won't bother anyone. Just wanted to give him a little food before I move on." Richard took a closer look at the piece of bread the man was sharing. It was an old baguette, probably gotten from a bakery at the end of the day, and yet he was splitting it with a stray. Are you hungry too?" Richard asked, uncomfortable with the obvious question. The man gave a sad smile. "You get used to hunger, doctor, but seeing an animal suffer, that hurts more than an empty stomach." At that moment, the dog finished eating and approached Richard, sniffing his pants. The businessman instinctively crouched down, and the animal licked his hand, leaving a warm, wet sensation he hadn't felt in decades. When was the last time he'd touched a dog? When was the last time he'd allowed himself a spontaneous act of affection? "He likes you," the homeless man remarked. "Dogs always know good people when they see 'em." Richard felt a lump in his throat. Good people? If this man knew how many families he'd evicted to build his developments, how many employees he'd laid off to boost profits, how many times he'd chosen money over people. "What's your name?" Richard asked, trying to push away the uncomfortable thoughts. Frank Miller Johnson," the man replied, extending a dirty but firm hand. Richard hesitated for a split second before shaking that calloused hand. The handshake was firm, honest, different from the calculated greetings he was used to receiving. "Richard Thompson," he introduced himself, deliberately omitting his titles and companies. "Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Thompson. Do you live around here?" "I work in the area," he replied vaguely. "And you? How long have you been in this situation?" Frank shrugged, as if the question didn't matter much. "It'll be 3 years this December, but don't worry, I get by. God never abandons us, you know. An angel always shows up when we need it most." The dog had lain down between the two men, seeming calmer now with his stomach partially full. Richard noticed several wounds on its paws, probably from walking on hot pavement. "This dog needs a vet," he said, more to himself than to Frank. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now continuing. "He sure does," Frank agreed. "But vets are for folks with money, right? The best I can do is clean his wounds with water and pray they don't get infected." Richard felt a growing unease. Here he was with millions in the bank, while this man couldn't even properly care for a wounded animal. The disparity was glaring, almost obscene. I can take the dog to the vet," Richard offered, the words coming out before he could think better of it. Frank looked at him in surprise, then shook his head. "You're very kind, but you don't have to trouble yourself. Just stopping to talk means a lot. You know, sometimes we go days without anyone looking us in the eye, like we're invisible." Those words hit Richard like a punch. How many times had he himself averted his gaze from the homeless? How many times had he rolled up his car window when someone approached at a stoplight? "It's no trouble," Richard insisted. "Please let me help." Frank fell silent for long seconds, studying Richard's face with those piercing green eyes. Finally, he nodded slowly. "All right, Mr. Thompson, but on one condition. I'm coming too. I won't abandon the little guy now that he's trusted me." Richard agreed immediately. He signaled to William, who had parked the car nearby and watched everything with obvious concern. "William, we're taking Mr. Frank and the dog to the nearest vet," he ordered. The driver couldn't hide his surprise, but professional as ever. He simply nodded and opened the rear door. Frank hesitated in front of the luxury car. "Mr. Thompson, I'm too dirty to get in a car like this." "Don't worry about that," Richard cut in. "It's just a car." But it wasn't just a car, and they both knew it. It was a symbol of worlds that weren't meant to cross, of supposedly insurmountable social barriers. Frank got in slowly, cradling the dog like a treasure. The exhausted animal fell asleep almost instantly. During the drive to the vet clinic, Richard watched Frank in the rearview mirror. The man gazed out the window with a melancholy expression, as if seeing the city for the first time. His hands never stopped stroking the dog, an automatic gesture of protection and affection. "It's been a while since I've ridden in a car," Frank remarked, breaking the silence. "Last time was in the taxi that took me to the hospital, the day I lost everything." Richard wanted to ask more, but something in Frank's tone suggested the story was too painful to tell just then. They arrived at the vet clinic in 15 minutes that felt like an eternity. It was a high-end clinic in the Upper East Side where Richard used to take his own pets, or rather, used to take them before. "Good afternoon, Mr. Thompson," greeted the receptionist, clearly surprised to see him after so long. "It's been a while since we've seen you here. How's Daisy?" Richard felt his blood run cold. Daisy, his golden retriever, had been his last connection to... "Daisy passed away," he replied curtly. "We're here for another animal." The receptionist sensed the tension and quickly composed herself, noticing William and the dog in his arms. "Of course. I'll call Dr. Jennifer right away." As they waited, William grew increasingly uncomfortable in the sterile, luxurious clinic. Other clients cast curious, sometimes hostile glances at the disheveled man who stood out so starkly in that setting. "Mr. Thompson, maybe I should wait outside," William whispered. "Absolutely not," Richard replied firmly. "You stay wherever you want to stay." Dr. Jennifer appeared within minutes, a young woman in a white coat and a professional smile. If she was surprised to see William, she didn't show it. "Good afternoon, Mr. Thompson. I see you've brought a special patient today." "The dog was found on the street," Richard explained. "He's injured and malnourished." The vet approached the animal slowly, who woke up but showed no aggression. William continued, holding him carefully. "Let's take him to the exam." "Room," she said. "You can come along if you'd like," she added, addressing William. In the exam room, the vet worked efficiently, checking the wounds, temperature, and heartbeat. The dog remained surprisingly calm, as if understanding he was being helped. "He's dehydrated and malnourished, but nothing we can't fix," Dr. Jennifer diagnosed. "The wounds on his paws need cleaning and treatment. I'll apply antibiotics and anti-inflammatories. He's probably 2 or 3 years old, still young, and he'll recover well." "What about the collar?" William asked. "He must have an owner, must be lost." The vet examined the worn collar. "No identification, but I'll check for a microchip." After a few minutes with the scanner, she shook her head. "No chip. He might have been abandoned. Unfortunately, it's more common than it should be." William clenched his fists, outraged. How could anyone abandon a little guy like this? Look at his face. Pure love. Richard watched William's genuine anger and couldn't help but think of the irony. A man who had nothing was outraged by an animal's abandonment, while people who had everything abandoned far more than pets. "We'll need to keep him under observation for at least 24 hours, the vet continued. "After that, if no one claims him, you can decide what to do." William lowered his head, defeated. He obviously couldn't adopt the dog, no matter how much he wanted to. "I'll cover all the expenses," Richard said quickly, "and then we'll figure it out." The appointment ended with the dog being taken to the recovery area. William seemed reluctant to let him go, as if he'd formed an instant bond with the animal. On the way back to the car, he looked visibly downcast. "You've been very generous, Mr. Thompson," he finally said. "God will reward your kindness." Richard felt like a fraud. Kindness. Spending a few $1,000s meant nothing to him. It was less than he spent on a business lunch. "William, do you have somewhere to sleep tonight?" he asked, trying to change the subject. "I've got my spot under the overpass. It's not the Empire State Building, but it does the trick," William replied with a dry humor that surprised Richard. "Can I drop you off somewhere?" William seemed to consider the offer for a moment. "If it's not too much trouble, could you take me to Times Square? I've got some folks there who might be worried. I left early this morning and haven't been back yet." During the drive, Richard couldn't stop thinking about how their lives had taken such different paths. They were the same age, both from New York City, but one was in the backseat of a Cadillac, while the other slept under overpasses. What separated their stories? Luck? Choices? Fate? "Do you have family, Mr. Thompson?" William suddenly asked. The question caught Richard off guard. Family, a word that had lost its meaning exactly 2 years, 3 months, and 18 days ago. "No," he answered after a pause that lasted too long. "I don't." William nodded as if he understood more than had been said. "I did," he said simply. "A beautiful wife and 2 wonderful kids. Michael would be turning 30 now, and Emily, 28. The use of the past tense didn't escape Richard. Would be, not is. "What happened?" he asked, even though he knew he might be intruding. William looked out the window for long seconds before answering. "Life happened, Mr. Thompson. One day you have everything, the next—" He made a vague gesture with his hands. "But that's not why I'm on the streets, if that's what you're thinking. My family didn't die, at least not the way you might be imagining." Richard waited for him to continue, but William had closed up again. They arrived at Times Square in silence, each lost in their own ghosts. "Thank you for everything, Mr. Thompson," William said as he got out of the car. "You saved a life today. That's worth more than all the money in the world." "William, wait." Richard took out his wallet and began pulling out some bills. "No," William raised, his hand refusing with dignity. "You've already done enough. Money given like this, without work, without earning it. It doesn't help. It only hurts the soul." Richard froze, the bills still in his hand. How many times had he tried to solve problems by throwing money at them? How many times had he believed his fortune could buy solutions to anything? "But if you really want to help," William continued, "stop by the clinic tomorrow and check on our furry friend. I'll try to be there, but sometimes life on the streets doesn't let us keep schedules." Richard nodded, putting the money back in his wallet. He watched William walk away, limping slightly, and disappear into the crowd at the square. Frank, who had witnessed everything in silence, finally spoke. "Are you all right, Dr. Thompson?" "I don't know, Frank," he answered honestly. "I don't know if I've been all right for a long time." Back in his penthouse in Tribeca, Richard poured himself a whiskey and stood on the balcony, looking out at the city. Down below, millions of people lived their lives, each with their own stories, their own pain, their small acts of kindness or cruelty. How many Williams were there on the streets of New York City? How many abandoned dogs? How many untold stories? He picked up the phone and dialed his secretary. "Sarah, cancel my appointments tomorrow morning," he ordered. "I have an urgent personal matter." "But sir, tomorrow is the meeting with the Chinese investors. Reschedule for the afternoon or another day, I don't care." He hung up before she could protest. For the first time in years, something seemed more important than closing another $1 million deal. He couldn't quite explain what, but the image of William sharing his only piece of bread with an abandoned dog wouldn't leave his mind. That night, Richard had trouble sleeping. He tossed and turned in his king-size bed, the Egyptian cotton sheets feeling suffocating. He got up several times, pacing the empty, silent apartment. He stopped in front of the photo frame face down, on the mantel. For 2 years he hadn't had the courage to look at that picture. On impulse he turned it over. There they were, a younger Richard, his arms around a woman with a radiant smile and a golden retriever at their feet. Elizabeth, his wife. Daisy, the dog they had adopted together when they got married. Both gone on the same day in the same stupid accident he could have avoided if he hadn't been so busy closing yet another damn deal. The tears came without warning, burning his eyes. How long had it been since he last cried? Probably since the funeral. He had shut himself off from the world, turning his pain into obsessive work, his guilt into purposelessly accumulated money. And then, today, a man who had nothing had shown him what it meant to have everything. Compassion, empathy, the ability to care for another living being even when his own life was in shambles. Frank had more wealth in his heart than Richard in all his bank accounts. The next morning, Richard arrived at the veterinary clinic as soon as it opened. Dr. Jennifer was surprised to see him so early. "Mr. Thompson, I didn't expect you. This early. The dog had a good night. He's responding well to treatment. Can I see him?" "Of course, come with me." In the kennel, the dog was lying on a comfortable bed with an IV for fluids and medication. When he saw Richard, he lifted his head and wagged his tail weakly. "He's doing much better," the vet remarked. "He's a gentle dog. It'll be easy to find him a home once he's recovered." Richard approached the bars and the dog licked his fingers through the grate. "Dr. Richard," William's voice made him turn. The homeless man stood at the door looking hesitant. He had tried to tidy himself up. His hair was combed back and his beard was trimmed with what must have been a dull pair of scissors. "William, you made it." Richard couldn't hide the joy in his voice. "A promise is a debt," William replied, stepping closer to the kennel. "Hey there, buddy, how are you?" The dog immediately reacted to William's voice, standing up despite his weakness and wagging his tail more energetically. The bond between them was obvious. "He clearly likes you," Dr. Jennifer observed. "Animals can sense when someone's good," William said, kneeling in front of the kennel. "Right, pal. You'll be better soon, you'll see." Richard watched the interaction with fascination. How could someone who had nothing radiate so much hope? "William, have you thought about adopting him when he's discharged?" he asked, already knowing the answer. William laughed, but it was a sad laugh. "I'd love to, Mr. Thompson, but look at me. I can barely take care of myself. How could I take care of a dog?" "He deserves a real home, food every day, a warm bed." "And love?" Richard interrupted. "Doesn't he deserve love too?" William looked at him, surprised. "Love I've got plenty to give. It's the one thing no one's taken from me." Richard made a sudden decision. What if I helped financially, I mean? You'd take care of him, and I'd cover the costs. Dr. Jennifer gently intervened. "Mr. Thompson, I don't mean to intrude, but William would need a permanent address for the dog's medical records, vaccinations, things like that." The silence that followed was heavy. The reality of William's situation loomed like an insurmountable wall. "Forget it," William finally said. "It was a nice idea, but life isn't a lifetime movie. Let's just hope he finds a good family." Richard felt a frustration he hadn't known in years. He was used to solving problems with money, but here were issues his fortune couldn't simply buy away. "Can I ask you something personal?" Richard ventured. William shrugged. "After yesterday, I think we're past that, aren't we?" "How did you end up on the streets? You mentioned a family." William took a deep breath, his green eyes dimming for a moment. "It's a long, boring story, Mr. Thompson. You sure you want to hear it?" "I've got all the time in the world," Richard replied, and for the first time in years, it was true. "Dr. Jennifer." Elizabeth quietly stepped away, leaving the two men alone with the dog. Frank sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, and began to speak. "I used to have an auto repair shop in Queens. Nothing fancy, but it paid the bills. I had my own house, a car, my wife worked as a teacher. The kids were in school. A normal life, you know. Then my brother showed up with a business opportunity, importing parts from China. Said it would triple our income." William could already guess where this was going. "I took out a bank loan, put the house up as collateral. At first everything was fine, the parts arrived, we sold them at a good profit. Then my brother disappeared, took all the company's money, left me with the debt. Turned out he had a gambling problem, owed dangerous people. And your family? My wife tried to hold things together for a while. But when we lost the house, when I had to close the shop, when I started drinking to forget, she took the kids and went to live with her mother upstate. I don't blame her. She did the right thing. I'd become a burden, not a husband. William felt his throat tighten. How many stories like this were out there? How many families torn apart by bad luck, a wrong decision, misplaced trust? And you never tried to get back on your feet? I tried. But when you fall, Mr. Thompson, it's hard to get up. No fixed address, no job, no home. It's a vicious cycle. And the worst part isn't hunger or the cold. The worst part is being invisible. You stop being a person, just part of the city's scenery. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps us newcomers. Now back to it. William remembered Frank's words the day before about going days without anyone looking him in the eye. How many times had he done the same? And your family, you never... I send word when I can. A friend I still have, Joe from the tire shop, sometimes lets me use his phone. But what am I supposed to say? Hey son, your dad's living on the streets, but it's all good. Better they remember me as I was before. That's not true, William said firmly. So you're still their father? Am I? Frank laughed bitterly. A real father sets an example, provides, keeps them safe. I can't even give them a hug because I haven't showered in 3 days. The dog, as if sensing the sadness in the air, whined and stretched its paw through the bars. Frank gently touched its paw. Sometimes I think animals are better than us, he said. They don't judge, don't abandon, don't betray. They just love. William thought of Daisy, his golden retriever. How she'd wait for him every night. How she'd celebrate his arrival even when he was in a bad mood. How she'd stay by his side when Elizabeth was away on business. The day of the accident, Daisy had been in the car with Elizabeth. They'd died together instantly while he was in a meeting discussing profits and margins. Mr. Thompson, you okay? Frank's voice brought him back. William realized tears were streaming down his face. Sorry, memories. Frank nodded understandingly. Everyone's got their pain, right? Rich or poor, everyone carries some cross. My wife died 2 years ago, William heard himself say, in a car accident. Our dog was with her. I'm sorry, Frank said simply, without the empty cliches William was used to hearing. She was coming back from a trip she took alone because I was too busy with work. Always too busy. She called me from the road, said she missed me, had a surprise to tell me when she got home. I said I was in a meeting, we'd talk later. There was no later. Frank stayed silent for a long moment, respecting William's grief. The surprise, William continued, his voice breaking, was that she was pregnant. I found out from the coroner. My God, whispered Frank. After that, I buried myself in work. I sold our house, moved into an apartment, got rid of everything that reminded me of her. I became a money-making machine, as if I could buy back the lost time. But you know what I discovered? Money can't buy the only things that really matter. The dog whimpered softly, as if sensing the pain of the two men. Frank reached out his rough, calloused hand and touched Richard's shoulder. Guilt is a vicious beast, Mr. Thompson. It eats you up inside. I blame myself every day for trusting my brother, for losing my family. You blame yourself for the accident. But you know what? Guilt doesn't change the past, it only ruins the present. Richard looked at Frank through his tears. How could this man who had lost everything be so wise? How do you bear it? How do you stay kind? Frank thought for a moment. Because I've learned that kindness is the only thing no one can take from you. They can take your home, your money, your family, even your dignity. But the ability to do good, to help another living being, that's ours till the end. They fell silent. Two men from different worlds united by pain and compassion for a stray dog. It was Dr. Jennifer who broke the moment, returning with a clipboard. Sorry to interrupt. The dog is recovering very well. If he keeps improving, he could be discharged tomorrow. We need to decide what to do with him." Richard and Frank exchanged glances. The fate of the animal seemed entwined with theirs in a way neither could explain. "I have an idea," Richard said slowly, "but I'll need both of your help." Frank and the vet looked at him curiously. "Dr. Jennifer, you said he needs a permanent address to adopt the dog, right?" "Yes, it's standard protocol." What if that address was temporary, like a place where Frank could stay while caring for the dog?" Frank shook his head immediately. "Mr. Thompson, I appreciate it, but I can't accept charity. I told you yesterday." "It's not charity," Richard interrupted. "It's a job offer." They both stared at him in surprise. "A job? I need someone to look after a property I own. It's a house in Brooklyn that was supposed to be something else, but it's never been used. It needs maintenance, someone living there to prevent break-ins, things like that. In return, you'd have a place to stay and a salary. You could take care of the dog." Frank looked stunned. "Mr. Thompson, this is... You barely know me." "I know enough. I saw you share your only food with a stray animal. I saw your dignity, even in the worst situation. I saw your kindness when you had every reason to be bitter. That tells me more about your character than any resume." Dr. Jennifer smiled faintly. "It sounds like a perfect solution. The dog would have a home and someone who clearly loves him." "But..." Frank still struggled to process it. "What if it doesn't work out? What if I let you down? Then we talk and find another solution. But something tells me it'll work." Frank looked at the dog, who watched them with hopeful brown eyes. Can I think about it until tomorrow?" "Of course," Richard agreed. "Tomorrow when you come to pick up the dog, give me your answer." They left the clinic together, each going their separate ways, but both changed by the encounter. Richard returned to his car, but before getting in, he called out to Frank. "Frank, the dog needs a name." Frank smiled. The first real smile Richard had seen from him. "How about Hope? I found him when I'd lost mine. Seems fair." Richard nodded, moved. "Hope. It's perfect." That afternoon, Richard did something he hadn't done in 2 years. He drove himself to Brooklyn. William was surprised when dismissed, but didn't question it. Richard needed to make that trip alone. The house stood on a quiet, tree-lined street. It was a simple but well-built 2-story home, with a small front garden and a backyard. Elizabeth had personally chosen that house. It was meant to be her project, a space to create a shelter for abandoned animals. She had always dreamed of doing something like this when she retired. Richard used the key he always carried with him, but had never had the courage to use. The door creaked as it opened, 2 years of neglect taking their toll. Inside, the house was dusty but structurally perfect. Elizabeth had good taste, she had chosen well. He walked through the empty rooms, imagining what could have been. Elizabeth caring for the animals, him helping on weekends, the baby that was never born crawling around the garden, Daisy running in the yard with other rescued dogs. But now perhaps the house could serve another purpose. Not exactly what Elizabeth had dreamed of, but something she would approve of. A good man in need of a fresh start, a dog in need of a home. It wasn't the shelter she had envisioned, but it was a beginning. Richard called his lawyer. "Robert, I need you to draw up an employment contract. Groundskeeper, caretaker, something like that. Fair wages, proper paperwork, everything by the book." "When do you need it?" "Yesterday." "Richard, is everything okay? You sound different." "I'm realizing it is, Robert. For the first time in 2 years, I think I'm okay." He spent the rest of the afternoon in the house, making a list of what he'd need. Basic furniture, bedding, kitchen, supplies. He scheduled a cleaning crew for the next day. If William agreed, he wanted him to find a decent place to start over. That night, he didn't go back to his apartment. He drove to Times Square looking for William. He found him sitting on the cathedral steps talking to other homeless people. "Mr. Thompson?" William was surprised. "What are you doing here at this hour?" "I came to show you something. Can you come with me?" William hesitated, glancing at his companions. "Go ahead, William," an older man said. "We'll see you tomorrow." In the car, William was visibly tense. "Did something happen to the dog?" "No, Hope is fine. I want to show you the house." "Now? At night?" "Now. They drove, in silence, to Brooklyn. When Richard stopped in front of the house, William looked confused. "This is it," Richard said, handing William the key. "Want to see inside?" William took the key with a shaky hand. "Mr. Thompson, it's an opportunity. For you and for the house. It needs life. You need a fresh start. Hope needs both of you." They went inside together. Richard had left some lights on before leaving. The house felt cozier that way. "There are 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a full kitchen," Richard pointed out. "The backyard is big, perfect for a dog." William walked through the house as if in a dream. "Why are you doing this for me?" Richard thought for a moment. "Because yesterday, you reminded me there's still kindness in the world. Because you made me cry for the first time in 2 years. Because maybe, just maybe, by helping you, I can forgive myself a little." William leaned against the wall, his legs seeming weak. "What if I fail? What if I start drinking again? What if it works?" Richard interrupted. "What if this is the chance you've been waiting for? What if hope is just the first of many animals you'll help?" "Animals? Plural?" Richard smiled. "This house was bought to be an animal shelter. It was my wife's dream. She couldn't make it happen, but maybe you." "I don't know anything about running a shelter," William protested, "but you know about compassion. The rest can be learned." William walked to the living room window and looked out at the quiet street. After a long silence, he turned back. "If I accept, I want to do it right. Really work, not just take handouts. I may not know about shelters, but I can fix things, tend a garden, I can." "I know you can," Richard cut in. "That's why I'm offering it." Frank extended his hand. "So we have a deal, boss." Richard Thompson shook that calloused hand firmly. "We have a deal, Frank." The next day, at exactly 8 in the morning, Richard was at the veterinary clinic. Frank arrived shortly after, wearing the same clothes but with a freshly shaved face. He had managed to shower somewhere. "Good morning, boss," he greeted with a nervous smile. "Good morning, Frank. Ready to take Hope home?" "Home," Frank repeated, savoring the word. "It's been a while since I've used that word." Dr. Jennifer greeted them with Hope already in her arms. The dog looked noticeably better, his eyes brighter, his tail wagging energetically. "He's cleared to go," she announced. "Medication for another week, special food for a month, then you can switch to regular food. I've written down all the instructions." Frank took the dog with infinite care. Hope immediately licked his face. "Hey buddy, remember me?" "How could he forget?" Richard said. "You saved him." "We saved him," Frank corrected. "You, me, the doctor. It was a team effort." In the car, on the way to the house in Brooklyn, Frank held Hope in his lap. The dog seemed to sense something special was happening, looking out the window curiously. "I have a confession," Frank said suddenly. Richard glanced in the rearview mirror. "Last night, after you dropped me off at the square, I thought about running away, grabbing my things and disappearing. The fear of disappointing you was stronger than the desire to have a home. What made you change your mind?" "I remembered Hope. I promised him I'd be here today. And a promise to an animal is sacred. They don't understand disappointment." They arrived at the house to find the cleaning crew already working. Richard had arranged everything. Besides the cleaning, basic furniture was being delivered. Nothing luxurious, but decent and comfortable. Frank stepped out of the car with Hope in his arms, tears streaming freely down his face. "This is too much, Mr. Thompson. Too much kindness all at once. It's the least, Frank, the least a human being deserves." They spent the morning organizing the house. Frank insisted on helping with everything, moving furniture, setting up the kitchen. Hope explored every corner, sniffing everything, marking his new territory. Around noon, when the delivery people had left, Richard and Frank sat on the back porch, watching Hope run around the yard. "You know what's strangest?" Frank said. "Having an address again. Yesterday, when you asked where I lived, I could say 457 Maple Street. It sounds silly, but it's like coming back to life." Richard thought of his own address, the luxurious apartment where he lived, but never felt at home since Elizabeth had passed. "Frank, about your family?" "I'll wait," Frank interrupted. "First, I need to prove to myself that I can do this, that I won't disappoint again. Then maybe. They have a right to know you're okay." Am I okay? Frank smiled sadly. I'm better, that's for sure, but okay will take time. Hope came running back, stopping at Frank's feet and wagging his tail excitedly. This one's already okay, Frank said, petting the dog. Look how happy he is. Animals are like that, Richard agreed. They live in the present, they don't carry the past. We could learn from them. Richard checked his watch. He had a meeting in 2 hours, but for the first time in years, he didn't feel the urgency to get back to the office. I have to go, he said reluctantly. But first, he handed Frank an envelope. Your first paycheck in advance, and there's a basic prepaid phone in there too. The clinic's number is saved, mine too. Anything, anytime, call me. Frank looked at the envelope without opening it. Work officially starts tomorrow, Richard continued. Today is just for you two to settle in. There's food in the fridge, food for Hope, cleaning supplies. If you need anything else. Mr. Richard, William stood up, moved. I don't have the words. Just thank you. The two men hugged, an awkward but sincere embrace. Hope barked as if wanting to join the moment. Take good care of him, Richard said, pointing at the dog. I'll take good care of both, William replied. The house and him. It's a promise. Richard drove away slowly, watching in the rearview mirror as William and Hope stood on the porch, an image that would stay etched in his memory. A man and a dog both rescued, starting a new life. At the office, Sarah, his secretary, noticed the change immediately. You seem different today, more at ease. I feel lighter, Richard admitted. Sarah, I want you to look into animal shelter regulations, required documentation, permits, that sort of thing. Animal shelter, she repeated, surprised. Yes, and schedule a meeting with the legal team. We'll need to create a legal framework for this. Richard spent the afternoon immersed in work, but unlike before, there was now a purpose beyond profit. Between spreadsheets and contracts, he checked his phone, waiting for news from William. Nothing yet, but he imagined William was busy settling in. Around 6 in the evening, his phone rang. Unknown number. Richard Thompson. Boss, it's William. Sorry to bother you. You're not bothering me. Is everything okay? Everything's great, it's just Hope did something and I wanted you to see. Can I send you a picture on Messenger? Richard smiled. William learning to use a smartphone was something he hadn't considered. Of course, send it. Minutes later, the photo arrived. Hope sleeping on a makeshift bed, hugging a pillow. The caption read, "His first peaceful sleep, mine too." Richard felt his eyes burn. How much power there was in small gestures, in small victories. A dog sleeping safely. A man with a place to sleep. Simple things that made all the difference. He replied, "May it be the first of many peaceful nights for both of you." The response came quickly. "Amen, boss, amen." That night, Richard did something he hadn't done in a long time. He went to bed with a sense of fulfillment, not because he'd closed $1 million deal, but because he'd made 2 fresh starts possible. In the darkness of his room, he allowed himself to think of Elizabeth. She would have liked William, she would have loved Hope, she would have been proud of what he'd done today. "I'm trying, love," he whispered into the void. "I'm trying to be the man you saw in me." In the days that followed, a routine began to take shape. Richard stopped by the house in Brooklyn every morning before work. William was always already awake, working in the garden or doing small repairs. Hope ran to greet him, growing stronger and healthier each day. "This dog's a better alarm clock than any machine," William joked. 6 on the dot, he wants his walk. William and Hope's morning walk started drawing attention in the neighborhood. Some looked on suspiciously. Who was this plain-looking man in the house that had been abandoned for so long? But others, especially those with dogs, began to approach. "Good morning," a woman greeted them one morning. "What a beautiful dog, new to the neighborhood." "Good morning, ma'am." "Yes, Hope and I are the new residents," William replied politely. "Hope? What a lovely name. I'm Mrs. Wilson. I live in the blue house over there. This is Buddy," she introduced her elderly poodle. The dogs sniffed each other cautiously. Hope, naturally sociable, soon played gently with the older poodle. "Do you work around here?" Mrs. Wilson asked with typical neighborly curiosity. "I work right here. I'm the caretaker, handling maintenance for the owner. Oh, how nice. This house was abandoned for so long. It's good to see life here again. Little by little, William got to know the neighbors. He discovered that the street had a small community of pet owners who gathered informally at the little square at the end of the block. Hope quickly made friends. Besides Buddy, there was Shadow, a little black mutt, Duke, a Rottweiler who defied his name by being extremely gentle, and Honey, an elderly golden retriever. Richard watched this integration with satisfaction. During one of his morning visits, he found Frank chatting animatedly with a group of neighbors while the dogs played. "Good morning, everyone," Richard greeted. "This is Dr. Richard, the homeowner," Frank introduced. "Boss, these are the neighbors. Mrs. Wilson, Mr. Harrison, Jessica." The introductions were made. Richard noticed how no one treated Frank with the suspicion or disdain he had feared. Here he was just Frank, the caretaker who took good care of the house and had a friendly dog. "Frank was telling us you're thinking of turning this into a shelter," commented Jessica, a young woman with 2 beagles. "I think it's wonderful. The neighborhood needs something like that." "It's just an idea for now," Richard said cautiously. "There's a lot of red tape involved." "If you need help, you can count on me," offered Mr. Harrison. "I'm a retired lawyer, I know the procedures." Richard exchanged a surprised glance with Frank. The community was offering to help even before the project officially existed. "That would be a huge help, Mr. Harrison, thank you." After the neighbors dispersed, Richard and Frank walked back home. "They're good people," Frank remarked. "They welcomed me without asking too much about my past." "It's a good start," Richard agreed. "You seem more, more like yourself." Frank smiled, a smile that reached his eyes. "It's strange, boss. It's been so long since I felt like myself that I'd forgotten who I was. But little by little, it's coming back. And your family. Have you thought about reaching out?" Frank's smile faded slightly. "I think about it every day, but I'm not ready yet. I want to have more to show than just a house and a job. I want them to see I've really changed." Richard didn't push. Everyone had their own time to face the ghosts of the past. That afternoon, Richard got a surprise in his office. Sarah entered with a worried expression. "Dr. Richard, there's a woman here to see you. She says it's about Frank Miller Johnson." Richard felt his stomach drop. Was this someone from Frank's past? Trouble? "Send her in." The woman who entered appeared to be in her early 50s, with graying hair tied in a bun, wearing simple but clean clothes. She had the same green eyes as Frank. "Dr. Thompson, my name is Mary Johnson. I'm Frank's sister." Richard stood, surprised. "Please have a seat. How did you find me?" Mary perched on the edge of the chair, visibly nervous. "A friend saw Frank the other day, getting into a fancy car. He wrote down the license plate. My son works at the DMV and tracked it to your company. I'm sorry for intruding, but I've been looking for my brother for 3 years." "Do you know where he's been?" Mary lowered her eyes. "I know. He was living on the streets. I tried to help at first, but he wouldn't accept it. Pride, you know. Then he disappeared, kept moving around. I lost track of him." "Why didn't you tell his family?" "Because Frank made me promise. He said he didn't want his kids to know, but doctor, a mother needs news. Karen, his ex-wife, calls me every month asking, what do I say? That I don't know. That he vanished." Richard chose his words carefully. "Mary, Frank is okay. He's working for me, has a place to live, he's recovering." Her eyes filled with tears. "Thank God. You don't know the weight you've lifted from my heart. But he's still not ready to contact his family. We need to respect that." Mary nodded, wiping her tears. "I understand. But doctor, his kids, they need to know." "Their father is at least alive, Michael especially. He blames himself, thinks he could have done something to prevent it." Blames himself? He was the one who introduced William to Frank, not knowing about his gambling problems. He feels responsible for everything that happened. Richard felt the weight of that revelation. How many lives were affected by that tragedy? How much guilt carried unnecessarily? "I'll talk to Frank," he promised, "but I can't promise anything. He needs to do this in his own time." Mary took a piece of paper from her purse. "This is my number. If he wants, whenever he Once, I'll be waiting." After she left, Richard kept staring at the paper, one more piece in the puzzle of Frank's life. He decided to wait for the right moment to bring it up. The moment came a few days later, unexpectedly. Richard arrived at the house in Brooklyn on a rainy morning to find Frank sitting on the porch, Hope lying at his feet. There was something different about him, a melancholy Richard hadn't seen in weeks. "Good morning, Frank. Everything all right?" Frank tried to smile but couldn't. "Morning, boss, just a tough day." Richard sat beside him. The rain created a grey curtain over the garden. "Want to talk about it?" Frank stayed silent for long minutes. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse. "Today's Emily's birthday, my daughter, 28. When she was little, she loved rainy days. Said it was the sky taking a bath to get all clean." Richard waited for him to continue. "Every birthday since she was born, I'd make pancakes for breakfast. It was our tradition. She'd have peanut butter, Michael would have caramel. Karen complained about the mess, but deep down she loved it." "You could call her," Richard suggested gently. "Say happy birthday." "And say what?" "Hi, honey. Happy birthday. Your deadbeat dad's crashing at someone's place and walking dogs." "You didn't abandon anyone, Frank. The circumstances—" "I did abandon them," Frank interrupted, tears falling. "When I started drinking, when I stopped fighting, when I chose to disappear instead of facing things, that's abandonment, plain and simple." Richard thought about how to bring up Mary. He decided to be direct. "Frank, your sister came to see me." Frank's head jerked up. "Mary? How did she—" "Someone saw you getting into my car, tracked me down. She's been worried about you for 3 years. Frank rubbed his face. "I told her not to get involved. She said your family doesn't know anything. That Karen calls every month asking for news. That Michael blames himself for what happened." "Michael? Why?" Richard explained what Mary had told him. He watched Frank's face twist in pain. "My God, my boy blaming himself. He had nothing to do with it. It was my brother, it was me being stupid. He doesn't know that. He's been carrying guilt. That isn't his for 3 years." Frank stood abruptly, pacing the porch. Hope followed him, concerned. "I can't. I'm not ready to face them yet." "You don't have to face them," Richard said. "But you could start. A phone call. A message. Just to say you're alive and okay." "Okay?" Frank laughed bitterly. "Look at me, Richard. Look where I am." "I am looking," Richard replied firmly. "I see a man working honestly. I see a man who saved a dog. I see a man rebuilding himself. That's not nothing, Frank." Frank stopped pacing, leaning against the wall. What if they don't want anything to do with me? What if it's too late? What if it's not? What if they've been waiting for you all this time? The silence stretched, broken only by the sound of rain. Finally, Frank sat back down. "Mary's number. Do you have it?" Richard handed him the paper. Frank stared at it like it was a foreign object. Can I call from here?" "Of course. Want privacy?" "No, stay, please. I need borrowed courage." Richard nodded. Frank picked up the phone with trembling hands and dialed. It rang once, twice, 3 times. "Mary?" Frank's voice came out strangled. "It's me." Richard couldn't hear the other side, but he saw William's face contort as tears streamed freely. "I know, sis, I know. I'm sorry. I'm okay. I swear I'm working. I have a place to stay. No, don't cry." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps. Those of us just starting out. Now back to the story. The call lasted almost half an hour. William gave a brief update about his job, about Hope, about his recovery. Mary apparently filled him in on the family. When she mentioned the kids, William nearly lost his composure completely. "Are they okay?" as he asked. "Did Michael graduate? And Emily, did she really get married?" Each answer felt like a knife to his heart, reminders of all he'd lost. But there was also something healing about it, like draining an infected wound. "Mary, I'm not ready to talk to them yet," he finally said. "But you can tell them I'm alive, that I'm getting help, that I think about them every day. Can you tell them that?" A few more words, and William hung up. He stared at the phone as if he couldn't believe what he'd just done. 3 years, he murmured. 3 years without hearing her voice. How was it? She cried a lot, said she never lost hope, said that the kids, he laughed through tears, I still call them kids, but they're adults now, said they miss me. And now, William took a deep breath. Now I have one more reason to keep fighting. Before it was just about surviving. Now maybe I can dream of getting something back. Hope, sensing his owner's emotions, climbed into his lap, licking his face. William hugged him. Yeah, buddy, you're right. One step at a time. Richard stayed a little longer, letting William process his emotions. When he left, he felt something fundamental had shifted. A door that had been closed was now open, even if just a crack. In the car on the way to the office, Richard thought about his own closed doors. How long had it been since he'd visited Elizabeth's grave? How long since he'd spoken to her parents, who'd tried to stay in touch after the funeral? And a red light, he made a decision. He called Sarah. Cancel my afternoon appointments. I have an urgent personal matter. He drove to Westside Cemetery where Elizabeth was buried. He'd avoided that place for 2 years, as if ignoring it could lessen the pain. The grave was well kept. He'd left instructions and permanent payment for its upkeep. He stood there, unsure what to say. How do you talk to someone who's gone? How do you ask forgiveness from someone who can no longer hear? Hi, love, he began hesitantly. Sorry it took so long. I couldn't come before. He told her about William, about hope, about the house she'd chosen, getting a new lease on life. He told her about his guilt, his pain, his attempt to make amends through small acts of kindness. You always said I worked too much, that I was missing out on life. You were right as usual. I lost you, I lost our baby, I lost the chance to be the husband you deserved. But I'm trying, Elizabeth, I'm trying to be better. He stayed until the sun began to set. When he left, he felt lighter, not healed, maybe he'd never be fully healed, but lighter. On the way back, he stopped by the house in Brooklyn. He found William in the yard playing with Hope. The dog chased a ball, bringing it back tirelessly. Good afternoon, boss. Everything okay? Everything's fine, William. Just stopped by to see how you're doing. Hope's full of energy today. I think the morning rain got him all excited. They sat on the porch steps watching the dog play. I called Mary again today, William said casually. She's going to tell the kids she talked to me. Said when I'm ready, they'll be waiting. That's a big step. Yeah. You know, boss, these past few days here taking care of the house, of Hope, I've been remembering who I was before everything went wrong. Not Frank the auto, shop owner, husband, father, but the real Frank, you know? The guy who liked waking up early, who took care of things, who helped others. You never stopped being that guy, Frank. You just got a little lost along the way. Everyone gets lost sometimes, right? The important thing is finding your way back. Hope came running, dropping the ball at Richard's feet. He threw it, and the dog took off. You know what Mrs. Wilson told me today? Frank continued. That the neighbors are talking about turning the house into a shelter. They're excited. Said they could help as volunteers. Really? Yeah. Mr. Harrison already looked up all the necessary paperwork. Jessica said she's a vet and can help with medical care. Even Mrs. Wilson, at 70 years old, said she can help collect donations. Richard smiled. Elizabeth's project coming to life in a way neither of them could have imagined. What do you think, Frank? You ready for this? Frank thought for a moment. You know what? I am. Taking care of Hope showed me I still have something to offer. And if I can help other abandoned animals, it's like helping myself too. You know? I know exactly what you mean. They stayed there until dark, tossing the ball for Hope and making plans. How many animals could they take in? What changes would the house need? How to organize donations and volunteers? When Richard finally left, he felt something long forgotten. Purpose. Not the empty purpose of making more money, but something real, tangible, that would make a difference in the lives of those in need. At home, he pulled out the photo album he'd hidden at the back of the closet. He flipped through it slowly, letting himself remember. Elizabeth in her wedding dress, Daisy as a puppy, sleeping between them in bed. The trip to Aspen where they'd decided to try for a child. For the first time in 2 years, the memories brought more sweetness than pain. Elizabeth would have been proud of what he was doing. She would have loved Frank, would have spoiled Hope, would have turned that shelter into something extraordinary. That night, Richard slept without his usual nightmares. Instead, he dreamed of Elizabeth smiling, Daisy running in a field, and the sound of happy barks filling the air. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Richard dove into the paperwork needed to legalize the shelter, discovering that Mr. Harrison was truly a valuable ally. The retired lawyer knew all the legal shortcuts, all the necessary documents. "I've helped set up 2 non-profits before," he explained during a meeting at the house. "I know exactly what we need." The room was full. Besides Richard, Frank and Mr. Harrison, there were Mrs. Wilson, Jessica, and 3 more neighbors who'd taken an interest in the project. Hope wandered among them all like a furry little host. "First thing, we need a tax ID," Mr. Harrison continued, "then a city permit, registration with the veterinary board, physical adjustments to the space." "About the adjustments," Jessica interrupted. "We'll need individual kennels, a quarantine area for new arrivals, space for basic vet care." Frank scribbled everything down furiously in a notebook. Richard noticed how naturally he'd taken charge of the project's logistics. "What about staff?" Mrs. Wilson asked. "Frank can't handle everything alone." "At first, we can run on volunteers," Richard suggested. "As we grow, we'll hire people." "I can dedicate 2 days a week," Jessica offered, "for checkups and basic procedures." "I can help with admin work," Mrs. Wilson said. "I was a secretary for 30 years. I know how to organize paperwork." One by one, the neighbors volunteered for different roles. Richard watched in awe as the community embraced the project. "We need to think of a name," someone said. Everyone looked at Frank. "Why me?" he asked, blushing. "Because you and Hope are the heart of all this," Jessica replied. Frank thought for a moment, then looked at Richard. "How about New Hope Shelter, in honor of our first rescue and, well, what he represents?" "Perfect," Richard approved, moved. The meeting went on for another 2 hours, with plans being made and responsibilities assigned. When everyone left, Frank and Richard stayed alone in the room. "Boss, this is really happening, huh?" "It is." "Scared?" "Terrified," Frank admitted. "But it's a good kind of fear, you know. Fear of doing something important, not just fear of surviving." Richard understood perfectly. That's how he felt coming back to life after 2 years of paralyzing grief. "Frank, I need to tell you something," he said after a pause. "This project was my wife's dream." Frank looked at him in surprise. "The one who died? In the accident?" "Yes. Elizabeth always wanted to start a shelter. I bought this house for that, but we never got the chance." "And you're okay with this? Seeing her dream come true without her?" Richard thought carefully. "For a long time, I thought it'd be a betrayal to do it without her. But now, I think it'd be a betrayal not to. It's a way of keeping her alive, you know?" Frank nodded understandingly. "She must be happy wherever she is, seeing the good that's growing here." "I hope so, Frank. I hope so." That night, Frank called Mary again. Their conversations had become regular, always at the same time. "How you doing, bro?" Her voice was warm. "Good, Mary. Really good. I'm coordinating a project now." He told her about the shelter, the neighbors, the plans. Mary listened, occasionally asking questions. "Frank, that's wonderful. You've always been good at organizing things. Remember the church bazaar? You ran the whole thing." "That was so long ago, I'd forgotten." "We never forget who we really are, bro. We just lose sight of shit sometimes." "Mary," Frank hesitated. "How are the kids? Really?" Mary sighed. "Michael's doing well. Got married last year, expecting his first child. Works at a multinational. An engineer like he always dreamed. Married? My boy got married and I wasn't there. Emily finished her master's. She's teaching at NYU, following in your footsteps. Lives alone, says she's too independent for a serious relationship. A college professor." Frank repeated in awe. "My girl's a college professor. And you know what she teaches? American literature. Says it was you who made her love books, reading to her when she was little." Frank couldn't hold back his tears. "I did read to her every night. Dr. Seuss, Maurice Sendak. She still has those books, keeps them like treasures. It was too much information, too much emotion. Frank could barely process it all. And Karen? How's she doing? Good. Still working, didn't want to retire. Lives with her mom, takes care of her. She hasn't gotten involved with anyone, if that's what you're asking. Frank felt a mix of relief and guilt. She deserved to move on. She made her choices, Frank. No one can judge. Mary, do you think they'll ever be able to forgive me? Bro, they never blamed you. They blamed the situation, the uncle, the bad luck. But never you, they just want you back, however that happens. After hanging up, Frank sat on the porch, Honey in his lap. The dog seemed to sense his owner's emotions, staying quiet, offering silent comfort. 3 years. 3 lost years. Michael, married, expecting a child. He'd be a grandfather and didn't even know. Emily teaching at NYU, living a dream he never knew she had. Karen alone, maybe waiting for something that would never come. But now there was hope. Not of going back to how things were, that was lost forever. But of building something new, maybe even better. A Frank who had hit rock bottom and found the strength to climb back up. A Frank who could look his children in the eyes without shame for what he had become. He wasn't ready yet. But for the first time in 3 years, he believed that one day he would be. The following week, the renovations on the house began. Richard hired a specialized team, following Jessica's guidance on the needs of a shelter. This will be the quarantine area, she explained, pointing to the plans. Newly arrived. Animals stay isolated until we're sure they're healthy. And there, asked Frank, pointing to a structure in the back, individual kennels for large dogs. Smaller ones can stay in groups, but the big ones need their own space. Hope supervised everything, sniffing the workers, investigating every change in her territory. He's nervous with so many people around, Frank observed. That's normal, Jessica reassured him. But look, he's not aggressive, just curious, a good sign. The renovations drew even more attention from the neighborhood. People Frank had never seen before showed up to ask about the project, offer help, or make donations. My son is autistic, said a young mother. Animal therapy helps him so much. When you open, can I bring him to interact with the dogs? Of course, Frank replied, moved. It'll be a pleasure. Every day brought new surprises. Donations. Poured in food, blankets, toys. Someone created a page on social media. New Hope Shelter quickly gained hundreds of followers. Look at this, boss. Frank showed Richard his phone. 300 likes on a photo of Hope. You learned how to use social media? Richard laughed. Jessica taught me. Said it's important for spreading the word, getting adoptions. Richard saw the pride on Frank's face. The man who months ago could barely face the world was now managing social media. Frank, I need to show you something, Richard said, pulling documents from his folder. The shelter paperwork is almost done, but I need an official director, someone legally responsible. You, of course. No, you. Frank's eyes widened. Me? But boss, I don't have the education for this. I don't know the laws. You have what matters. Commitment, compassion, life experience. The rest can be learned. Mr. Harrison will help with the legal side, Jessica with the veterinary part. But you're the heart of this shelter. I don't know what to say. Say yes. It's a better salary, more responsibility. But I know you can handle it. Frank looked at Hope as if asking for an opinion. The dog wagged his tail. Looks like the boss approves, Frank joked, emotional. Then yes, I accept. They shook hands, sealing more than a professional agreement. It was a vote of confidence, an acknowledgement of how much Frank had grown. That night, Frank called Mary with the news. Director. Frank, that's wonderful. It's a lot of responsibility, Mary. I'm scared I won't measure up. You've always measured up when you needed to, bro. Remember when Dad died and you took over the family at 17? You worked, studied, took care of all of us. This is different. It was harder back then. Now you have support, you have structure, and you have purpose. You know what? Scares me the most. I'm starting to be happy again, and when you're happy, you have more to lose. Mary was silent for a moment. Frank, listen. Happiness isn't a guarantee, but unhappiness doesn't protect you from anything either. You've already lost everything and survived. Now it's time to live. not just survive. When did you get so wise? Must run in the family, she laughed. Frank, can I tell you a secret? Sure. Emily knows I've been talking to you. She asks about you. Don't tell Michael yet, but she asks every time she sees me. Frank's heart raced. What do you tell her? The truth, that you're doing well, working, recovering, that you're not ready yet, but you're on the right path. And what does she say? That she'll wait as long as it takes. That the father she loves is still out there, they just need to find each other again. Frank hung up the phone with his heart pounding. Emily knew. His little girl knew and didn't hate him. It was more than he'd dared to hope for. The next day, Richard arrived earlier than usual. He found Frank already working, painting the sign that would hang at the entrance. New Hope Shelter. Every animal deserves a second chance. Looks nice, Richard complimented. Mrs. Wilson did the lettering, said she took a calligraphy course when she was young. The whole neighborhood's involved. It's beautiful to see, isn't it? People who barely spoke before now working together for a cause, Richard agreed. The project had created more than a shelter. It had built a community. Frank, can I ask you something personal? After everything we've been through? Ask me anything. Why Hope? Out of all the possible names, why that one? Frank stopped painting, thoughtful. When I saw him that day sharing food with him, I'd just been thinking about giving up. Not on living, but on trying. I thought I'd be on the streets forever, that there was no way out. Then this dog shows up, just as lost, just as hungry, just as abandoned, and yet with those eyes full of, I don't know, hope that someone would help. It felt like a sign, you know? And you were the one who helped. No, boss. We helped each other. I gave him food. He gave me a reason to keep going. That's why hope, because that's what he brought. Richard felt his eyes burn. How many lessons had he learned from this simple man and his little mutt? You know, Frank, you gave me hope too, when I thought I'd lost the ability to care about anything beyond work. We never lose that ability, boss. Sometimes it just gets buried under too much pain, but it's always there, waiting. As if understanding they were talking about him, Hope came running from the backyard, barking happily. He stopped between the two men, tail wagging, tongue lolling. Look at him, Frank laughed. Like he's saying, enough philosophizing, back to work. And they did. Side by side, painting the sign that would mark the official start of a new chapter, not just for the shelter, but for everyone involved. Richard thought of Elizabeth, how happy she'd be to see her dream come to life. He thought of Daisy, of all the animals that would be saved here. He thought of second chances, fresh starts, hope. Frank thought of his family, how one day he could tell his kids about this project, show them that even after falling he'd gotten back up, that he'd turned his pain into purpose, his failure into a chance to help others. And hope? Well, hope lived in the present, as dogs do. In the warm sun, the smell of fresh paint, his two favorite humans working together. For him, life was perfect in that moment. And maybe, Richard reflected as he painted, that was the greatest lesson of all. To live in the present, cherish the, now find perfection in simple moments. Elizabeth had always tried to teach him that. It took a little mutt and a homeless man to finally make him understand. The official opening of New Hope Shelter was set for a sunny Saturday in October. Frank barely slept the night before, running through every detail in his mind. Easy, buddy, he said to Hope, who sensed his owner's nerves. It'll all work out. By 7 in the morning, he was already up, checking the kennels, the feeding area, the paperwork at the makeshift reception desk. Everything had to be perfect. Richard arrived at 8, bringing coffee and cheese bread from a nearby bakery. Figured you'd be too nervous to make breakfast. You figured right, Frank admitted, gratefully accepting the coffee. More nervous than on my wedding day. It's a big day, nerves are normal. Little by little, the volunteers trickled in. Mrs. Wilson, with her 70 years, and the energy of a 40-year-old. Jessica in a new lab coat embroidered with the shelter's logo. Mr. Harrison with a folder full of adoption forms, and a dozen more neighbors who had promised to help. Everyone, before we open to the public, Frank called for attention, I just want to say thank you. 6 months ago, I was invisible on the streets. Today I'm here running this beautiful project, surrounded by good people. This is more than I deserve." "No, it's not," Mrs. Wilson interrupted firmly. "It's exactly what you deserve. Everyone deserves a second chance, Frank. You took yours." At 10 o'clock they opened the gates. The first surprise, there was already a line. Families interested in adoption, people wanting to learn about the project, reporters from the local paper. "Frank!" a woman's voice called. He turned and nearly lost his breath. A woman around 28, brown hair in a ponytail, green eyes just like his, stood at the gate. "Emily?" His voice came out in a whisper. "Hi, Dad." The world stopped. Frank couldn't move, couldn't breathe. His daughter, his little girl, here after 3 years. Emily took the first step, then another. When she got close, Frank could see the tears in her eyes. "Aunt Mary told me about the opening. I needed to see you." "Emily, Frank began, but his voice failed. "You don't have to say anything now," she said gently. "Just, can I hug you?" Frank opened his arms, and his daughter threw herself into them. 3 years of absence, guilt, and longing melted in that embrace. Both cried, oblivious to the curious looks around them. "I'm sorry," Frank whispered. "I'm sorry for everything." "Shh," Emily soothed him. "It's okay now. You're here, you're okay. That's what matters." When they finally pulled apart, Frank could really look at her. She was beautiful, grown, a woman now, a college professor, Mary had said. "You look beautiful, sweetheart." "You look different," she observed. "Thinner, more grey, but more like yourself, you know, like before everything." "This is Hope," Frank pointed to the dog, watching curiously. "She saved me." Emily crouched down, and Hope immediately licked her face. "Hi, Hope. Thank you for taking care of my dad." Richard approached discreetly. "Frank, sorry to interrupt, but the reporters want to talk to you." "Oh, right. Emily, this is Richard Thompson, my friend and boss. Richard, my daughter Emily." Richard extended his hand, moved by the reunion. "Nice to meet you, Emily. Your dad talks about you a lot." "He does?" She looked at Frank in surprise. "Every day," Richard confirmed, "about both his kids all the time." "Dad, go talk to the reporters," Emily encouraged. "I'll look around. The shelter. We'll talk properly later." Frank hesitated, as if afraid she'd disappear if he looked away. "I'm not going anywhere," she promised. "I came to stay." The interview was a blur. Frank could barely focus, answering on autopilot while watching Emily move around the shelter, talking to volunteers, playing with Hope. "Mr. Frank, how did the idea for the shelter come about?" the reporter asked. "It was when I found Hope abandoned. I realized everyone deserves a second chance, animals and people. And the community support? Essential. I learned that when you open your heart to help people give back, kindness is contagious." The story would be on the front page of the local section the next day, but Frank barely noticed. His attention was all on Emily. The day passed in a whirlwind. 3 dogs were adopted, all tan-colored mutts rescued in the previous weeks. Dozens of people signed up as volunteers. Donations came in all day. But for Frank, none of it mattered as much as the fact that Emily stayed. The whole day, she helped with adoptions, organized files, charmed kids with stories about the dogs. By late afternoon, when things slowed down, father and daughter finally had time to talk. They sat on the garden bench, Hope lying at their feet. "When Aunt Mary said you were doing okay, I didn't believe it," Emily began. "I needed to see it with my own eyes." "I understand. I'm so sorry for everything, Emily. For disappearing, for not being the father you deserved." "Dad," she interrupted. "I didn't come here to demand anything. I came because I missed you, because I love you, because I want you back in my life, whatever way that works." Frank cried again. Crying had become far too common lately, but these were different tears from the ones he'd shed on the streets. These were healing tears. "Does Michael know you came?" "Not yet. He has a harder time dealing with this. His personality has always been more like yours, you know. Bottles everything up, doesn't show it. But he misses you too." "He got married," Mary said. Yes, Melissa is a sweetheart, you'll like her, and they're having a baby in 5 months. I'm going to be a grandfather, Frank murmured in awe. You are, and I hope you'll be a present one. If he lets me, he will. Give him time. Michael always needs to process things at his own pace. They talked for hours. Emily told him about her master's degree, her classes, her students. Frank spoke about life on the streets, about finding hope, about Richard and the shelter. 3 years condensed into an afternoon. I have to ask, Frank finally said. Your mother, how is she? Emily smiled sadly. Mom is strong, you know that. She works, takes care of Grandma, keeps up with her routine. But she never took off her wedding ring, Dad. Frank looked at his own hand. His ring had been sold in his first month on the street, along with everything else of value. The mark on his finger had faded long ago. She deserved someone better. She had who she chose, and she never gave up on you, even when everyone told her to move on. Emily, I don't know if I can go back to being who I was. No one's asking you to. We just want you to be who you are now. The man who built this, she gestured toward the shelter, who saved a dog and was saved by him, who's helping other animals and people. That's the father I want back. When Emily finally left, promising to return the following weekend, Frank sat in the garden for a long time. Richard found him there, lost in thought. Big day, Richard remarked, sitting beside him. The biggest, Frank agreed. My daughter, Richard, my little girl came to see me. She's special. You can see where she got her strength of character. She takes after her mother, Frank said automatically, then paused. No, you know what? I think she takes after both of us. The best of both of us. Hope lifted his head and barked as if in agreement. And now? Richard asked. Now? Now I keep going. One day at a time, taking care of the shelter, rebuilding myself, proving I deserve a second chance. Today showed me it's possible. If Emily can forgive me, maybe everyone can, Richard finished. Yeah, maybe. They stayed there until dark. 2 men who had found redemption in unexpected ways, one through compassion for a stranger, the other through the kindness of an unknown soul. And between them, a dog named Hope, who had been the catalyst for so much change. The shelter was officially open, but more than that, doors that had seemed closed forever had swung open. For Frank, the door to forgiveness and reconciliation. For Richard, the door to purpose and overcoming grief. And it had all started with a simple gesture, sharing bread with someone who was hungry. Kindness, as Frank had said in the interview, really was contagious. And in a big, often cruel city like New York City, small acts of kindness could create waves of change bigger than anyone could imagine. That night, Frank called Mary. She came, sis. Emily came. I know. Mary was crying on the other end. She called me, said you talked, that it was beautiful. It was perfect. She's become an incredible woman, Mary, a teacher, independent, mature. How did she grow so much in 3 years? She was always mature, Frank, but her father's absence made her grow up even faster. The remark stung, but it was true. She said Michael still isn't ready. Give him time. You know how he is. He needs to process everything, plan each step. But he'll come, Frank, in his own time, but he will. And Karen? Mary hesitated. That you'll have to find out for yourself. But Frank, one thing at a time, okay? Today was a huge day. Enjoy this victory. After hanging up, Frank went to check the shelter one last time. 3 of the kennels were now occupied by dogs waiting for adoption. 2 had been brought in during the event by people who knew of abandoned animals. Good night, everyone, he said to the dogs. Tomorrow we'll find you a wonderful family. Hope followed him faithfully, as always. When they got home, Frank made dinner, rice, beans, and a fried egg. Simple food that 3 years ago would have been an unimaginable feast. You know, buddy, he said to Hope as they ate, today I realized something. We never go back to who we were, but we can become someone better, someone who knows pain but chooses kindness, someone who fell but learned to get back up. Hope tilted his head, as if understanding every word. Tomorrow it really begins, the shelter running, more animals coming in. We're going to save a lot of lives, you and me, and who knows, in the process we might just save ours too. The dog barked in agreement and Frank laughed. 6 months ago he was talking to himself on the streets, ignored by everyone. Now, he was chatting with his four-legged best friend, leading a project that would change lives. Redemption, he'd learned, didn't come from grand gestures or dramatic changes. It came from small daily choices, choosing kindness when bitterness would be easier, reaching out when it would be safer to close off. And it had all started with a piece of bread shared on an ordinary afternoon. Sometimes the biggest miracles begin with the smallest acts. The end. And what about you, dear listener? Have you ever witnessed an act of kindness that changed lives? Share your experience in the comments. If this story touched your heart, leave a like and subscribe for more uplifting tales of resilience and hope.